We are live. I just decided to go live straight away. I'm sorry, everyone. We have had a lot of technical issues. I had a weird issue with my camera and then my internet, and yeah, it's been crazy. But I'm very thankful that Matt could make it to this Rocket Lab Weekly end of year episode.
Yeah, it should be a good time. Always appreciate you having me on.
Yes. And first of all, I have to start with, I got to give you kudos. I was actually, before putting my kids to bed, watching your videos about your yearly portfolio. And you had $50,000 income from your dividends, YouTube, and covered call or like options trading. And I was like, man, that's impressive. That's a full like family income that you made.
I don't know if it was quite 50, but it was like 17 from options, about 22 and change from dividends. So it was definitely in the 40s. I don't know if it got past 50,000, but yeah, it was a good year.
Anyways, I was impressed. I was like, shit, that's really, really good. So
yeah, it all gets reinvested back into the portfolio. I don't use any of it. I still have my 9 to 5. So, but appreciate the support.
Awesome. So this week is a short week for Rocket Lab, and but still there is some things that have happened. So we had some notable sales and buy of Rocket Lab, and namely Dave G's fiance sold and betrayed Dave, and it almost led to a divorce. I think they're fine now.
They're seeking counseling. No, I shouldn't speak on their. I shouldn't speak on their marriage. I'm just having a joke, but yeah.
He totally got.
It was a funny video, though. Very funny video. Yeah. I was laughing the whole time.
Yeah, me too. And Kathy Wood started buying. No, she didn't start buying, but she bought more Rocket Lab at this price. I don't know. Does it mean anything to you if Kathy Wood is buying one of your stock, or is it just side news?
Yes or no? I mean, it's side news for me. I mean, I hope that it just means that eventually it'll grow into the company and the innovation of it that I think. But I think it's not specifically for the ARC-X fund. I think it's I forget what fund it is specifically for.
It was the Q, I think.
Or maybe ARC-X is the one. Maybe is ARC the ARKK? What's the normal innovation fund?
That's the K.
Okay, so yeah, she's buying an ARC-X, which is the space exploration and innovation fund. So yeah, I mean, she's not buying it in the main fund, I don't believe. I could be wrong on that, but so she has a lot of other things like L3 Harris and many other things in there as well. So I think it's in good company, but I'm not entirely sure if she's bought Rocket Lab in the ARC-K fund, but I should do some more due diligence on that one.
Yeah, we'll check it out. I mean, for me, it's funny because she was the God investor in 2020, and then she kind of has fallen from grace. And I think this year her ETF was the best producing ETF again on the market. She made like 70% or 67% or something like this. So maybe she's on a comeback. But yeah, it doesn't really mean anything to me. She sold Palantir she bought Palantir in the 14s, I think, or high, and then she sold them low, and then she missed like the run up, and then she bought back again at 14, and yeah, so it's just noise to me.
Yeah, I mean, when you have so much influx of capital, you have to find places to put it, right? So when they had so many people pulling their money, unfortunately, you have to sell. So I think that led to a lot of realignment into what things were buying into throughout 2022. So I think they were selling it in opportune times. And then with the market doing so well this year, I think you had a lot of people loading back in and a huge influx of capital. I think that just means that they had to buy things that they might not necessarily have wanted to because they have to deploy that capital somewhere. So I think it's just the ins and outs of the market. Unfortunately, sometimes, and when interest rates are what they are, although Palantir doesn't necessarily need the debt of it, but I think they get grouped in with a bunch of other companies that might be, say, smaller, not profitable as of yet, and they get grouped in with all those companies that, you know, people trash them. And now that it's kind of a standalone thing, and interest rates are getting towards a peak and eventually getting into the cut area of the next year or two, I think that Palantir's been benefiting from that, and same with Rocket Lab to an extent, but not as much. But we're here to talk about Rocket Lab, not Palantir.
Exactly. And on Rocket Lab, let's take it in this order. I was actually wanted to do a recap of 2023 and what things they accomplished in 2023. And I was going through their investor reports and I was taking notes. And so we had 10 launches this year. We're missing one. They promised us 2 launches in Q4. It doesn't look like we're getting the last one. We don't know what happened to it. If you go on Rocket Lab's website, there is no next mission, even though I don't know if it's this launch whack-a-mole, like the customer was not ready, or I don't know if they ran into some other problem. But okay, so 10 launches, which is really good. They mentioned that Electron profitability improved very much this year. Neutron is moving along. I kind of found it annoying in the investor reports. It's interesting to, you know, like when you read them as they come out and then you get an idea and then you go back and have a look at them again. And what I found a little bit annoying is that I feel that on every report, they are showing good news about Neutron and they're saying that, you know, we got this thing done and we got that thing done, but there isn't like a clear timeline for us investors to know, like, okay, they're exactly here, and you can't really follow it, you know. And I saw that on many investors reports, it was like the Neutron stage 2 tank mold is done, you know. And then I'm like, yeah, if you're not in the rocket business, you can think that they're very ahead on the stage 2 tank, you know. And then on the next investor report, it was like, now we made the pre-production model. And then you think, okay, now they're done with stage 2, you know. And then the next investor report is like, now we did the testing on the stage 2 and now it's really, really ready. And I'm like, but is it? Because are we gonna have like in Q4 that it was like some other thing that they did on the stage 2 tank? And I kind of wish that was different, but I still feel like Neutron is moving along fine. You can also jump in with any notable things if you want to. Yeah. Then Haste was, I believe, introduced to us in 2023, which is a new use of the Electron rocket for a military testing purpose. As far as I understand, it's a ballistic interception system that they're part of, like a much faster way of intercepting national threats to the US. And they sold 7 contracts so far, and it looks like they're going to have many more of this.
Yeah.
Then Neutron made a lot of steps towards recovery. They had their first marine recovery of Electron.
Yeah.
Exactly. They reused the first Rutherford engine. And I think this was the year for Rocket Lab. How would you rate this year for the stock? Was it like they delivered, or is it something you were missing? Or
I think it was a year of execution. I think that they may have kind of been sideswiped a little bit with what happened at the end of 3Q with respect to having to figure out what was going on with the shorting and the anomaly that kind of happened with the second stage. So that I think ended up delaying Neutron a bit, but I still think that they were on track. And I think, you know, you might have said that you don't think they have a lot of transparency. I think that they're going in to about as much transparency as they can with Neutron, than being, I guess, over bullish and maybe over promising, right? I mean, I think now we're starting to recognize that with clarity in recent news that they've kind of unveiled, the remaining steps, right? Which is the kind of hull testing, and they talked a little bit about it in the pounding the table interview as well. Like some of these things and materials that they've used before or had not been used before, and so testing those is almost as important or more important to do to make sure that they held up with respect to the yield strength and everything the like. Than just a normal engine, right? Because the engine isn't really mind blowing, right? They kind of stated it's like the Archimedes is something that it's just an engine, right? It's not going to be anything that is going to be mind blowingly powerful or anything of the like. It's going to be kind of low in terms of capacity usage, right? So it's going to be using 10 to 15, 20% of its capacity, when it's used in the Neutron rocket. So the thing that they think they were most challenged about was kind of the tanks. And so getting that done and making sure that that's appropriate and making sure what works and what doesn't work, I think is going to be more important than the lifting piece. And I think that they're making clear headway. And so with that, once you kind of get the Archimedes piece done and tested, I think it's going to be very quick to get things on the pad and dry rehearsed. And so that's at least my thought process. But everything else, I mean, I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get more launches in there. It was a comparable cadence to what was done in 2022. So maybe I'm just being a little bit over pessimistic with respect to that. But the thing that I'm most excited about is looking towards the future and seeing if they can continue to grow at pace with the space systems business, with the 22 launches that they have and the docket for next year, and then coupling that with a really successful Neutron test. That and listening, well, I'm sure we'll get more depth into it, but that and listening to the Pounding the Table interview and just thinking about from taking a 30,000 foot view where this company could actually be compared to where it was when I invested in 2021 is just like, it makes me even more bullish to the day. So I'll just leave it there and give it back to you.
Okay, just because this is a recap episode, I'm very curious because I started following this stock maybe 3 to 4 months ago. So in 2021, where was the company at?
You mean in terms of me or what? Sorry, what was the question?
Like when you were investing in the company, like what was like, how many launches did they have? How many was Neutron even in the picture? How big was it before they started?
Yeah, I mean, I think Neutron was announced slightly after I had kind of became a shareholder, and I just want to give a shout out to my boy Cole. Cole is kind of the one that mentioned to me, Cole Kramer. He's a cool guy. He's the one that kind of told me that Vector Acquisition Group was actually going to reverse SPAC into Rocket Lab, and I'd heard of Rocket Lab off and on because I follow like space launches just because. And I wasn't saying I'd be an expert in space launch by any means, but it just excites me, right? That frontier exploration piece excites me. So at the time, they were at like low 20s or mid 20s in terms of launches. At that point, it excited me that they were a small company that was going to be competing in that space. And it was just kind of like okay, let me think about, is there an opportunity? And I was actually one of the reasons why I started investing in Google in 2020 was to get SpaceX exposure. And so once I had seen that there's an opportunity to invest in something that had success, like a Rocket Lab, I was very excited. And at that point, I didn't really know much about their space system business. And to be honest, I don't think that they had even a big space systems business on their own. And then when they got the $985 million from the SPAC, and they started to invest in late 2021, early 2022 into some of these businesses like Solero and some of the other Star Tracker space systems pieces. Initially, I was very hesitant, and then I realized, like, no, this is actually pretty good. And it even got even more verified, and my confidence grew even after listening to the Pound of the Table interview, because it basically was stating, like, it went from just being a small launch company to very quickly, within 6 months to a year, me investing, having a solar systems business and having a medium launch business that was going to be kind of going after the Falcon 9. And I was just like, who is this guy, Peter Beck? And I started to get, a little bit more into it. It turned into being a $2,000 investment to, me continuing to grow the opportunity, because the share price was so cheap that I was able to grow it into a much larger holding. And so it's been nice. It's been a great development over the past 2 to 3 years, and it's a very great opportunity that I have kind of just stumbled into, to be very honest with you. It was very unlike what I did with Palantir. Palantir, I knew the company, I'd worked with the company, been working with them for several years. Versus Rocket Lab, I was just like, let me just toss in $1,000 here or there. We'll see what happens. And it truly was allowed me to double down as the company made the right decisions. Where most companies that de-SPACed, their share price also went basically close to zero, but those guys pretty much floundered their money, right? Versus Rocket Lab, they made strategic investments and changes within their organization to do what Peter Beck talked about in the Pound of the Table, making a multi-generational company that lives way beyond his lifetime and can develop into something that is probably going to be the premier space company by the time you get into the middle of next decade. So it's really cool to see that development over the past 2.5 years since I invested. And it makes me even more bullish. The only thing I will say again is maybe the cadence piece of Electron. It's gotten better, but I still am like kind of scratching my head about this one. It's gotten better in terms of being able to turn around more launches, but there's still intermittent periods where there's silence, and I'm still not 100% certain if that's just availability of customers, or if that is specifically pertaining to the cadence ability of a Rocket Lab. So it kind of goes back to me trying to understand specifically, because back then they were like 7 or 8 launches in 2021, and then it went to like 10 launches or something, or 9 or 10 launches in 2022, and where they're at today, which is 10 launches for 2022. So they haven't been able to like double the launch cadence as I kind of expected them to be able to do since 2021. So next year will be a true testament as to whether or not they can do
it. Yeah, I agree to that 100%. And by the way, it's a very nice segue into what I also really wanted to talk about. Is there has been this fantastic podcast from Pounding the Table, where Nico Bierkoltz, one of us retail investors, actually made it on the podcast, and he managed to speak with Peter Beck and even asked him some really amazing questions. Really jealous of Nico.
Yeah.
And he really undersold this interview on last week's Palantir Weekly. He was like, yeah, you will really not find anything new on this interview. And I was almost like, he doesn't want us to watch it. And then when I watched it, I was like, Nico, you were really, really wrong. There was a lot of new data that somehow has never been said the way Peter Beck said it on that interview.
Yeah.
And again, just to address the comments, because Peter Beck said that we can have an investor hangout on the Neutron launch party.
He did say that,
yeah. And then some people, Christopher Bell, said that we're going to have the launch party in your beach house, and then some people wanted to join in. So I'm totally for it. I don't even know if your beach house is in the right place.
It's definitely not. I mean, it's definitely. I think between me, so it's southern New Jersey. You have Delaware, Maryland, and then you get to Virginia. So I don't know. It's probably way too far away, but I think people just want to have a beach house party just for the sake of having a beach house party, which I'm all for. So
okay.
And maybe with the profits, when we get to that point, I'll be able to buy a second one. I mean, that's kind of the goal. So maybe I'll. And I actually was looking at land where Christopher Bell was talking about, and I found some pretty nice plots of land for like 70, 80,000. You could set up like launch party, Airbnb, or who knows what the hell you can do, and maybe set up little pods for people to watch. It's literally right across the way from Wallops, which is where Neutron will be launched.
Oh, that would be so awesome if we could have an Airbnb. Like I saw what's this chick's name? Ellie in Space videos, and she was actually doing a video when she was going around all the Airbnbs that popped up around Starbase, and I was like, oh, this would be, yeah.
I've thought about that as well, because that's like 4 or 5 hours from me, on the south part of Texas, right across the Mexican border. I've thought about buying houses there as well for Airbnbs. So
yeah. So on this podcast, there was very, very interesting multiple things that have come up. You have already mentioned that Archimedes doesn't seem to be a challenge. Like, there was a worry in the Rocket Lab community that it seems like the Archimedes engine is delayed, and then Peter Beck was like, you all need to take a chill pill. We cannot test the engine in parts. It's an engine that has to be assembled in one, and you can only test it in one piece, but it's the least innovative part. That's what he said of the rocket. And it's funny because it's one of those things that, because even Musk is saying that the rocket engines haven't changed since the 60s. It was all discovered then, and the only thing that is changing is like how you get mass out of the rocket and how you make it reusable. And when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, like, of course. But I don't know why we got worried. So that was very, very nice to see. Then another part that for me, I never had it explained in such a way, is that he said that, when they started designing satellites, they had these critical supply chain pieces. For example, the solar panels and was it the star trackers, that he said that it was a 9 months lead time, and the books were closing in August. So if you don't order by August, then it's 1 year and 9 months. So then they actually just bought up that company. And he said it's a very unfair advantage that they have, because any other satellite producing company has that wait time, whereas they can just prioritize their own satellites and actually start guaranteeing schedules. And they did it not just on star trackers, they did it on solar panels, and they did it on many other things. And I was like, damn, this is like a bigger advantage than I thought. Did you catch the same thing? Or
yeah, 100%. And that was something that I think I didn't really give a lot of credit to. I just assumed that they were acquiring for the sake of acquiring, and I knew that the solar system, the Solero business, was a little bit more niche, but I didn't realize that the Star Tracker piece was as niche as and as kind of crucial to the supply chain piece as originally, or I guess now stated by Peter Beck. So very, very curious what other businesses, but it makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, not every company, it's a how do I say it? It's a growing total addressable market, and so people, I'm sure, would rather build stuff for the aerospace industry, or rather than, I guess, the space industry, because I'm sure the total addressable market for aerospace is way bigger. So yeah, it's just interesting how these things are being developed. But I think with that, like you stated, they're developing themselves a little bit of a moat that I think is truly starting to differentiate them between a Blue Origin and SpaceX. And while I'm sure from a launch perspective, things will continue to be competitive between the three, I think that Rocket Lab is getting themselves to a place where they can differentiate and truly be a league of their own in the next 10 years, with at least how Peter kind of described it. And that's what made me more bullish after listening to the podcast.
Yeah, you know what I thought about is that, like, for example, on Solero, he said that there's 3 companies that can make the solar panels for satellites, and Solero, the one that they bought, was the biggest,
Right.
And I was like, we know that everybody's building mega constellations. Like, nobody's talking about, like, flying individual satellites. And I'm like, what if Amazon puts in their order for 6,000 satellites for their Kuiper, and that takes out like 2 of the company's production for the next 3 years, and then you have a few other companies that also want to build mega satellites. Then who like, it becomes such a bottleneck, because
Right.
a few companies with their mega constellations, they take out all the production capacity of basically the entire planet,
Yeah. And it makes me wonder why, like, if it, because Elon's a smart guy, right? It makes me wonder why an Elon hasn't tried to build an end-to-end space company. And I truly think it's just because there's a difference of what objective they're trying to acquire.
Yeah.
Elon himself wants to go to Mars, and Peter, within the interview himself, stated that he doesn't really care about leaving the Earth. I think he's okay with staying, and he doesn't have that kind of aspiration. And he applauds the astronauts, right? But he doesn't necessarily want to be one of them. Versus an Elon, I think Elon eventually wants to get to Mars, and that's kind of his end goal. So he doesn't necessarily care. But at the same time, I say that, you still have the piece of Starlink, and what's the highest and best use of space infrastructure, which I think was a really good conversation piece that Peter and company got into in the interview, which is what comes after Neutron, right? Like Neutron is pretty much in the books. If you think about it from a perspective of timeline and where we are in space exploration. So, I mean, if you think about it from the 40s till now, 80 years on, what's kind of happened? Neutron's, it's going to happen, right? It's inevitable. It'll be within the next 18 months. So that's kind of done and dusted. So it's kind of like, what's the next big frontier for Rocket Lab to kind of go onto? And he talked a little bit about Mars. So that'd be cool to see the NASA Mars crafts go in, and then the Venus one that's supposed to take place in 2025. But it makes me wonder, like, the space systems piece and what's going to happen with respect to, are they going to try to create their own internet company? Are they going to try to make other things better? I don't know what exactly they're going to do with respect to creating some sort of third or fourth revenue stream. I don't even know what revenue stream you could call it, but it's interesting to kind of hear him talk about the company and where they are in terms of evolution. But I think he's still trying to sit and understand exactly how the place is going to play out. I think that they've mastered, or they're getting to a place where they've mastered space launch and space systems, and they can kind of wait and take, as a profitable company, or soon to be profitable company, as revenues continue to increase and SG&A continues to slightly stay flat, if not slightly rise as the company grows, but it's getting in line. The space systems piece is something that they could probably wait on, and they'll be able to execute well because they have so many other pieces of the pie well established.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly don't think that even they know where it is going, because he mentioned in the interview that, sometimes you need to just hurry up and then be paid, like hurry up and rest, or something like this. And then
wait, yeah.
He said that it's very important that, you develop Neutron, like hurry up with that. And then you have the capability to launch, and then you scale up the space systems business so that you can produce, and then you wait and see. And it's funny, it's kind of an unfair game, because I thought about it. It's very funny, but launch is a very bad business, because it's probably it's a race to the bottom between the space companies that will exist, because there is no brand value in what rocket your product is launching, right? It's just like, what's the cheapest way to get this space to orbit, right? And then if you are a satellite manufacturing company, like let's say Planet Labs, or like the Amazon Kuiper, that you just want to get your satellites in space, it's also a very bad business, because somebody who has a rocket company can copy what you're basically dependent on you're dependent on the rocket company. But when you have both, it's like an unbelievable moat, because nobody's going to be able to move as fast and as cheap and as efficient as, and there's only SpaceX so far that has both of these things together. And yeah, Rocket Lab is going to be the second one. And I think it's very risky to start. There's going to be a new IPO. I forgot which space company it was, but it's also a satellite company, And I'm like, I would be so afraid that SpaceX or Rocket Lab or one of these companies just literally takes your business model, and they're like, yeah, it's cheaper for us to make it in-house. And then, yeah, like it's basically a no moat business.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, going back to, I think that this is a good transition piece. I mean, the haste piece is right, so Christopher's right with respect to that, but kind of going back to the $515 million contract, and you kind of getting that news from Francisco about specifically who that was for. I mean, the Space Development Agency, or the SDA, is a subset of SpaceX. Sorry, not SpaceX, Space Force, the U.S. Space Force, and they're basically just trying to make sure that they have the ability in the future to be able to control space, right? Which is like obviously the Air Force was done to be able to control the air. Space Force is literally so that piece, the SDA's piece, and the 72 vehicles or whatever, if you want to bring up that article that Francisco provided to you, that I think is going to continue to be persistent. That's not going to be a one and done contract. I think if Space Force continues to be the fifth leg of the armed forces of the United States, I think that the collaboration between Rocket Lab and the SDA is really getting themselves pinned as a defense contractor for the United States. And so if that's the case, then there could be a multitude of alliances and applications that could be included from a geopolitical standpoint. Do we align with other agencies across the world to collaborate, and who are we protecting from a space perspective? Are we just doing the United States at the moment? Are we going to try to do both? So that being said, I think that there's just a lot of running room associated with that I don't even think we've been again to touch the surface, because if you're talking about space agencies now trying to create a layer of basically defense forces within space, you're going to need way more than 72 aircraft or spacecraft to this perspective. So I'm curious to see how that works, and that just sets up a revenue stream, not just for 2027, but for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, maybe even longer. And it gets you to a place where that need for a rocket lab to be within the defense kind of budget spending makes it almost a company that can't go bankrupt at that point, because it's necessary for national defense of the United States. So they would almost provide whatever means necessary to keep the company alive. But I don't think that they'll need to rely on that. But it's very interesting. What's going on. I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so to give a little bit of background, so Francisco Ramirez, I probably butchered your name, I'm sorry, sent me on Twitter that he has found who this secret agency is that ordered this 500 million contract that we just got last week. And he sent me some articles, and it looks like, as Matt said, that it's the Space Development Agency's plan of a defense constellation that is multi-layers, and they have some satellites that transport communication, some other satellites. I'm not an expert on this. I was hoping that Matt was an expert so he can talk about it on the pod. But what you said, which I thought was very, very correct, that even Peter Beck said on the interview that it was very important for this government customer that Rocket Lab was able to basically guarantee the schedule. And if you are, a national defense agency and you need satellites up for, national defense, you can't afford to go to companies and say like, yeah, we will produce this satellite, we will put in the order for star trackers and solar panels, and sorry, their factories are busy, it will be 2 years before we get, as opposed to like being able to go to Rocket Lab and yeah, sure, within 3 months we make the satellites and we have like 0 bugs because we control the whole production line. And this gives a huge moat. And even Peter Beck said in the interview that he's surprised that they're already getting these contracts and that they're already becoming such an important factor in national defense. And this also makes them a strategically super important company, as you said. And this was part of my thesis when I invested in Rocket Lab, that if they would run into financial trouble, the government would probably bail them out because they need them to function with everything that they do.
It definitely wasn't part of my investment thesis, I'll tell you that, but it is now. A nice ad, I will say. It definitely was not there initially.
Okay. I mean, I did come a little bit after you, so it was more. How do you call it? Like, I think this investment, when you went into it, it was a lot more speculative than it is now.
Yeah, I would say the capital exposure risk has decreased substantially and continues to get better by the quarter.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because I was very afraid that Rocket Lab will need to raise finances. I even did videos on, like, it can be via loans, it can be via a convertible stock, or it can be a straight equity offering. And I was speaking about how important it is that the stock price goes up. And when I listened to this podcast, I really, really chilled out. It was very interesting how Peter Beck thought about money. And they asked him, like, how do you feel about, the budgets tightening in space? And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I got $5 million to develop Electron, and the new space comers, they're getting hundreds of millions to develop like a similar rocket.
And these are people that haven't launched a rocket, right? And this guy's done it 40 times. Not only 40 times with Electron, but the many times he's launched smaller rockets, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then he said that they have, like, the reason why they named the Rutherford engine because this guy had a famous saying that because we don't have money, we have to think, and that's his. And I was like, he's so calm about money, and I'm like, I think this guy is going to put a rabbit out of his hat, and I don't think he needs to raise capital anymore, because otherwise they would not be so, like, I feel like they don't care at all where the stock price goes, right? Like,
you could have just listened to your boy, man. You could have just listened to your boy. You should just listen to me. But I know you need to hear it out of multiple people's mouths. Sometimes you need some people to bring you along, and over time you eventually move to the right side. Sometimes you need to think it's your own, but no, it was really comforting to hear that they're not just trying to spend like crazy drunken sailors. And I think if Rocket Lab was starting, say, in the early 2010, 2012, 2013 timeframe, it may have been a different avenue, because before, when they started in 2006, space industry privatization wasn't really a thing, right? Like, Obama had really only shut that down, and things started to move that way from a United States perspective, by the way. In the 2012, 2013, when he started really shutting down and hampering NASA's budget going forward. And that meant we would have to kind of ride share with the Russians and all this stuff, right? So it wasn't until more recently, in the last 10 years or so, where this was even an important piece of the puzzle. But I think had Peter not been a part of that early bootstrap days, I think things might be different. But I think because he's been able to develop so much on such an efficient capital efficiency basis that I think it's going to not only be something that, how do I say this? Other people are throwing, as we've seen with Virgin Orbit, Astra, other people are throwing money at the problem. And a lot of times it's not necessarily money that gets things done, because money doesn't have process of thought. Money is fuel, right? So if you don't have the right avenue or the right means or anything of the like, it's just going to burn, right? So if you don't put it in the right engine, or you don't put it in the right vehicle, it's just going to burn, right? And I don't mean that from like a launch perspective. I just mean that in general. And so with the good forethought, with good engineering and good technical basis, you're able to make things move in a lot better way than if you're just, I don't know, whatever. I'll just say whatever some of these other companies are doing. They literally will burn hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars up in smoke.
Yeah. I mean, I look at Relativity. They haven't had a fully successful launch yet, and they have almost comparable amount of employees to Rocket Lab. And and they don't have the space systems. Like, a lot of Rocket Lab employees are like literally producing things in the space systems division. And right. I'm like, what are those guys doing? And yeah, it's a sickness also to have too much money lying around. Like sometimes it's good to not have access to money. Coolios. So the next subject, or what I wanted to take up, is Astra shares have gone up 80% this week. And a lot of people are asking what's happening with that company. Is there something that we are missing? So do you have any theories of why that could be? I have one.
I think it might just be certain people. If you take the company private, right, you're going to have to basically buy everyone's shares out. So it could just be some people that want to be involved in the process. I mean, if you think about from a market cap perspective, it's $51 million as of yesterday. If you buy into the company and you buy into what it could be, you know, everything that's set up and all the equipment, everything the like, it's definitely going to be worth more from a liquidation perspective than $51 million. So I think if that's the case, I think you have some people wanting to get involved in the company. And even if you take something private, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be fully owned by one or two people, right? I mean, even Elon, while we say he's the owner of X or Twitter, he doesn't own it 100% outright. Like he has other investors that he has to kind of appease to. So I anticipate that that's probably what some of these Astra folks are doing. And they recognize that time is of the essence, and eventually the stock will go private, and with that, they're just trying to get their piece of the pie because
so what you're
it's like
saying
you
is
just have major hedge funds getting involved to be involved at a cheap price.
So you're saying inside trading.
Not necessarily. I think the writing's just on the wall. I mean, they announced it. When was that? Early December time frame that they're exploring privatizing the organization, and so maybe there's rumblings about when that will happen, and you're right. Maybe there is some talk amongst the street as to when that deal would close, but yeah, I don't know. You could be 100% right. I don't know.
No, because that's
It's
also
all speculation for me.
Yeah, because that's also the exact theory that I had, that like to take the company private, you have to offer the board a deal that is like better than the market price of the stock, right?
Right.
And I'm like, what if they found a way how to do it, and then some people know that this deal is coming, and then they are just front running, like they know that, okay, the deal will be announced at $3, and then the stock is at 1.3, and then I was thinking that this is like the definition of inside trading, but I guess we will see, because if the news comes out, because it could have happened, any other week before, and then if the news comes out, let's say next week, then it was inside trading, like some people knew that the announcement was coming.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see. I mean, I don't wish poorly upon anyone. I want the space to continue to propel forward. No pun intended. I think the competent in execution will only continue to competency and execution in the space will only continue to drive innovation. And I think that with that, you'll have more competition, which will make things better between everybody. Otherwise, everyone's going to be lazy and be slow, right? I don't want that, and I think it kind of brings that innovation piece back. I mean, even one of the things we didn't touch on was kind of the design of Neutron and how it might actually be better than the Falcon 9 because of the Falcon 9, right? It wasn't because they just happened to stumble in. It was just like, well, they looked at what happened with Falcon 9. They looked at how it was like reusability. And then they said, what if we were to develop this from reusability first rather than, trying to. And so because they know it was possible, because of what the Falcon 9 was able to accomplish over the past 5-6 years, I think that they were able to take that step back and like say 30,000 foot view. How are we going to design this from a vehicle standpoint? And I thought that was a very interesting conversation that they had, and on the Pound on the Table podcast as well. So,
yeah. So definitely recommend every Rocket Lab investor to watch that podcast. It was Nico really undersold it in last Rocket Lab Weekly. It's a fantastic podcast, and I only found it on Twitter. Did you find it on YouTube or?
Yeah, there was a small channel that had like 35 subscribers that was able. I don't know if he was part of it or not, because he had the comments turned off and everything the like, and so yeah, it was I was able to find it on YouTube and watch the actual video, which was great. So yeah, the whole, I don't know if it was, I saw 38 minutes of it, so I don't know if that was the whole thing or not, but that's what I found.
Yeah, the same here. That's what was shared on Twitter, and that's the only thing also I found. We have a super chat here. Thank you so much. You don't have to do it, but obviously it feels nice with super chats. Johnny Wolf, he's asking, what do you think NASA landing on the moon in 2025 will do to Rocket Lab stock? I believe even just from FOMO, it will have a huge bull run then.
I'll start. I think it's going to be hugely beneficial, because if it's successful, Rocket Lab will actually have a key in that success, because it's helping design parts of the lunar lander that Firefly is creating for that 2025 landing. So Rocket Lab will be a part of what gets landed on the moon. It'll be great, because obviously the Psyche mission is in between Mars and Jupiter. This Firefly lander will be on moon. We'll be going to Venus, as kind of Peter talked about in the podcast, but I've known about that for about a year or two now. So I think overall, it's going to be a continued brick in the foundation of what Rocket Lab is able to achieve and continue to build off of.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying. And I think that, for example, this 500 million contract that we got, I think that these things like prove out the business model of Rocket Lab. Like they prove out that Peter Beck did the right things in acquiring these companies. They are going in the right direction, and I think that the stock should have gone up more on this contract. And then I think the stock is going to move very much on the Neutron test launch, Neutron having contracts announced, and I think that yes, the stock will maybe also move on this moon landing, but I think it will be more of an accomplishment than a stock mover. Like it will be a very good creating goodwill for the company. Like it will get the name of the company out, but I think that the big stock movers will come before it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it'll be a good opportunity. I think Rocket Lab is really setting themselves and differentiating themselves here. And as revenues continue to expand going into next year, I think we'll continue to see that going into 2025. And very curious to see where we end up once Neutron starts launching. I mean, he stated specifically $55 million entry price. Whether that comes down to 40 eventually, is to be determined. But I mean, the cost per pound to be able to launch Neutron at that point, I mean, you're talking about a 20x uplift in lifting capability compared to the Electron, but yet it's only 7 times more expensive. So overall, you're getting your capital efficiency for launch better, and I'm sure over time the efficiencies will continue to get better and better over time. With that, even what was the last thing I was going to say? Yeah, I mean, the Firefly thing is going to be great. I'm curious to see. And to get more specific about that, I was going to post the actual link there. It's the Blue Ghost lander that Firefly is creating, and they're providing the solar panels to help land and power the lunar lander.
I always think on this mission, like it's like this irrational fear, like what if it goes wrong? Like what if the solar panels don't work? Then they will be like the ones that like mess up the whole thing. But it's just just what I bite my nails on all the time.
Well, I mean, it literally. I mean, they're. I'll write. Maybe I should just share this really quick, if you don't mind. So that way.
Go ahead.
But this is the mission specifically for 2025. So I'll just read it aloud. Let me zoom in a little bit. So Solero by Rocket Lab is providing the solar panels to power the Blue Ghost, a lunar lander developed by Firefly Aerospace to deliver 10 NASA payloads to the moon's surface. ASI by Rocket Lab is also providing the lander flight software, ground software, GN and C software, which I don't know what the GN and C stands for, but
Isn't
trajectory
it
design.
ground control or something?
Yeah, probably. You're right there. Probably. Orbit determination, avionics, flight software, testbed integration. So ASI by Rocket Lab is also hosting the Backup Mission Operations Center. The robotic Blue Ghost lander is part of the NASA Commercial Lunar Payload Services Program that works with companies to deliver science and technology to the lunar surface to explore the moon and prepare for human missions. So obviously, with a landing going on in 2025, a lot of that will be powered by Rocket Lab.
Awesome, exciting stuff. I want to just show a comment from Johnny Mack. He is basically commenting that we are also overlooking the heating up of new space race between China, India, and the US, and Rocket Lab will only benefit as more money is funneled towards the industry. And then he gives this example that the first large success of a Chinese rocket company that makes massive news here will lead to an influx of interest in US launch companies. I think a major tailwind to Rocket Lab. And that's actually a good point that is not even in my thesis. It's actually true, because I think if China would do something wild in space, then I think the US Congress would sit together and like, how come that it's not our companies that are doing this, and immediately go like, okay, we need to throw money at this problem. We need to throw US debt into this. US debt to the rescue.
Yeah, I think so. I think at the moment we're thinking about it from a Space Force defensive piece, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, at the moment, we're one of few to have landed on the moon, and it's been so long since we've been back. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, yeah, I think that'll light a fire under some people's butts.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good comment by Johnny.
Yeah. Cool. So I think to end off this episode, what do you most look forward to in 2024 from Rocket Lab?
I think two things: continued cadence, and increasing the, I think, increasing the revenue piece to get towards profitability and closer towards profitability. And second, Neutron, because Neutron's going to be the next largest revenue stream that we have. And so with that, I think that'll be hugely where a lot of our next step up of growth will come from. And then once that's accomplished, I can kind of start to see where the real differentiation comes, which is the space infrastructure piece. And I'm sure that announcement will come in 2025. Becoming a millionaire. Well, too late for that one.
But in 2024, he's looking for becoming. For you, no, okay, I got it.
2024, maybe it'll get me towards my second million. That'd be nice, but we'll see.
Okay. I thought fool's gold meant like that he himself would become a millionaire. But
got it. Yeah, that's. I hope so, man. I hope everyone has the opportunity. I honestly, I'm very confident that this company will 4 or 5x from here. Very confident in that, with just what we have in place, and then the things that are being put into place now are really differentiating it. Will it be a $30 or $50 billion company? And within the next 2 to 3 years, I think we'll be able to kind of determine that piece. And to be very honest with you, with the way that I think that Peter's moving, if he's able to accomplish that within the next 10 to 15 years, I could see this being a $100 billion organization.
Yeah, the same here. It's so funny because, I was like, I bought my position in Rocket Lab. I reached 100,000 or a little bit over $100,000 in Rocket Lab. And then I was like, okay, it's time to find a new company, And I was like looking at different companies, and Warren Buffett has this quote that sometimes the best thing that you can do is like buy more of what you already have, And I was like, especially after this pounding the table interview, I'm like, what if I would just be even more concentrated on Rocket Lab, because my conviction is going up. But that's a crazy thought for me. I haven't
I don't think it's a
but
bad one. I mean, I'm that's more my investing style. The older I get, the more I'm like, just have your the majority of my money in the S&P, which is this macroeconomic reliant, and then really focus my big bets. So the companies that I take outsized positions in, and I'm talking like the Googles, Amazons, Palantirs, Rocket Lab, Dutch Bros of the world, like the outsized things that I think will truly make a difference. That in terms of portfolio growth, I think that you really need to focus, because there's a lot of speculative bets out there that could 10x, but high risk, high reward, right? I mean, everyone kind of goes back to that. So, a company is not going to 10x unless they're challenging a huge innovation space, or they're really disrupting an existing industry and doing it better. So, you can't, how do I say this? Like, that's why one of the reasons I love SoFi. I hope everyone that's invested in SoFi does really well. But I don't know if SoFi is doing something to the extent of revolutionizing the entirety of the banking industry. And I could be wrong on that, right? Where it could develop into a $300 billion, it could disrupt the JP Morgans of the world, but I just don't see it at the moment, right? It's not revolutionary enough. So to me, yes, will people get to 2-3x? I think that very confidently it'll be a $20-30 billion bank. It's $9 billion today. So I wish everyone the best with respect to investing in SoFi, but I see something like a Rocket Lab as taking on a little bit of extra risk. And with that, and every launch, it gets more and more etched in stone that this company can deliver. And I think within 6 to 12 months, after we get a little bit more news about Neutron, the path towards profitability will be inevitable. But I'm not saying it's inevitable right now, but I'm saying in 6 to 12 months with a little bit more certainty on Neutron and continued revenue growth, path towards profitability will be inevitable. And at some point, the share price at $5-6 is going to be too cheap to pass up. And the valuation of this company is going to be re-rated to a $5 billion stock. And that'll immediately make the stock go from $5 to $10. And that'll make everyone happy that's in this room. But I think it might still make people be like, oh, well, it just doubled in price. It's like, well, it's a long time coming, because you think about it, it was a $10 billion valuation, kind of when it was, or $5-10 billion valuation when it's SPAC'd, and then it's decreased substantially since that point. And but anyway, just some food for thoughts there.
Yeah. By the way, fool's gold, 47 and 1,000 shares. That's an amazing size of Rocket Lab position. That's way more than what I have, and congrats.
Way more than I got. Yeah, way more than I got.
That's the most that I've seen from retail. So that's pretty freaking good. I have some way to go with my shares. And yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. I feel that what a lot of people don't understand is that there's two ways of investing, and for example, it's so funny. I was speaking with my uncle on Christmas, and he started stock market investing, and he's like, I'm going to invest like Warren Buffett. And I'm like, why the F would you invest like Warren Buffett? He's very defensive. He's very happy with, like 15 to 20% per year. And I'm like, your portfolio is like, he's planning to have like between $10,000 to $20,000 out on the market. And I'm like, what's your goals of being on the market? Because yes, if you want to be defensive, then yes, invest like Warren Buffett. But if you want to grow your 10 to 20,000 into $1 million portfolio, first of all, you need to figure out a way to add way more money than 10,000 per year. And second of all, you kind of need to take chances on certain companies that you have really, really researched. And it was a super investor, I forget his name, that he said that the more companies you have, like the harder it is to beat the market, because it's like a coin flip, that it's like if you flip a coin 30 times, you will get very close to this 50% heads and 50% tails. But if you flip it only like 3 times, then you might have, like 3 heads, and you maybe like super much beat the average, right?
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot of people miss this, and they over diversify, and they go into a lot of companies, and it's fine, but maybe it's not what they need at the life stage that they are and the goals that they have, because they will never.
You hit it on two things. I don't necessarily, one of which I agree with, but not everyone needs to invest like we do. That's for damn sure. 20% return is also phenomenal. It's double, if not triple, depending on what numbers you use, the average for retail investors for sure, and also at least double, if not more, the S&P 500 average returns. So if you're able to consistently put that up for 20 years, you're going to 40x your money. So that $10,000 will eventually grow into 400 grand. So I guess the other piece as well is just making sure that you're consistent about adding capital to the portfolio. But I think so there's a bunch of different things in there that I just wanted to get it. That's not necessarily Rocket Lab related, but I think there's a lot of different ways that people need to look at this. And I think size is one thing that you're right. I think people need to look at it. It's like, if you have $10 in the stock, you're probably not going to be a millionaire off of $10 investment.
Even if it's 100x's.
Exactly. So you need to be realistic. I have a buddy I love to death, but he'll put like $500 into companies. Like, that's the max I'm putting in. And I'm like, well, my guy, even if that 100x is like, it's going to turn into 50 grand. It's not going to turn into like $1 million. And I think a lot of people they kind of like hope and pray, and they don't really, and it goes back to anything, whether it's retirement, whether it's but you need to start with the end in mind a lot of times, and understand what your objective is for every investment. And whether that's retirement, or whether that's specifically for this company here, what size position you want it to be, you need to be like, well, where do I want to get to? If it's $1 million and you think that this is going to 10x, then you need to put 100 grand in, right? I mean, that's just the clarity of it. If you think it's going to 20x, you need to put 50 grand in. If you think it's going to 50x, you only need to put 20 grand in. So that's the sort of thing where people need to take a little bit of more time and effort, versus just being like, I have $500 today. Where can I get the most return for my money? It's just like, well, there's a lot of places that could 1000x, 2000x, right? But at the same time, it's like, I think that this one is one of the ones that it's slightly behind in terms of being able to get to profitability, but I think we'll get there. But in terms of its growth potential, I think it's one of the better opportunities on the market as of right now, because it is successful. It is doing something that is necessary. It's building themselves into the needs of, say, the defense security of the United States, and then also it's going to be profitable, and they're releasing a medium-sized launch vehicle that's going to explode revenue going forward. So I think that this is one of the best opportunities on the market right now.
I completely agree with you. And just to give a little bit more context about my uncle, he has like 10 years to retire, and he wants to have a very substantial portfolio. And my point is that he's, as you said, like, he's not going backwards. Like, this is the money I need to arrive at, and how much percent am I going to be making per year, and then how much money needs to be put in. And like, his sentence was that he found like a technical trader guy, and he can like double his portfolio every year, and that's what he's going to do while investing like Warren Buffett. And I was like, let me see how that will turn out. Like, it's doesn't sound too promising.
Yeah, sounds pretty tough. We'll see.
Yeah,
fingers crossed for him.
Yeah, I tried to talk some sense into him, but yeah, he's one of those guys that needs to experience on his own.
Yeah, unfortunately, some people just need to be slapped in the mouth once or twice when it comes to investing to truly get the idea that, there's a reason why not everyone is trading in the stock markets, because it's very difficult, right? So if it was the case, like, you have to, and I think it gets increasingly more difficult, because it used to be any schmuck that put their money in the market would do well, but now there's so much information, there's analysis paralysis. It's like, the ability, the average IQ of people investing in the stock market has now come down, because it's so accessible that now, you still have to in order for you to continue to be or performing at a high level, because the stock market was such a rare tool because of access and things of the like. I feel like you used to be able to find more outsized returns. Now everything's so competitive that you really had to be on your game or really looking like a hawk in order to truly make that big difference, because everything's so accessible to people. All the information is available. But that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah. Awesome, Matt. I want to wish you a very happy new year. Thank you so much for being on here today. And happy new year to the whole Rocket Lab community. And what do we wish for? Do we want another year of Rocket Lab being in the 4 or 5 range so we can increase the position size? Or do we want the stock to start skyrocketing? Which one is better?
Oh, man. I would like to get a few more thousand shares personally. But
Okay.
We'll
So
see
maybe
we'll
some
see when
people
it
are going
happens.
to hate us, but the 2024 wish is for Rocket Lab to stay, not moon. So retail can load up.
That's the hope. We'll see.
All right. Thank you, guys. Happy New Year. Thank you for supporting us this year, and see you guys next year.
Thanks for having me on, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.